It is so great to see that smiling face of yours. And since I was traveling last week in Lake Tahoe, I thought it'd be a perfect time to film a video about travel photography tips. However, I have a confession to make. This is actually the second time that I'm filming this video because the original time was shot last week while I was hiking up 1.8 miles up to Eagle Lake at Lake Tahoe. Now there are 8 modules in this travel photography tip video, and what I was doing was stopping at points along the 1.8 mile hike up this icy mountain to film, giving you folks something different to look at. So here's what happened. I'm gonna throw myself underneath the bus. As I'm beginning to make this trek up this mountain, I break out my camera to start recording, and I look for my headphones. I didn't have my headphones with me, so I was not able to verify the audio and how clean it was or if there was any static coming in from the winds. So while the wind was blowing, I didn't think it was too bad at the base, so there was really no way to check, so I kind of went for it. But I did stop about 80% on the way up there. The wind was blowing too strong, and what I did was I ended up filming the remaining 20% back at the hotel room later that evening. I'm back home and nearly the entire video is unusable. The audio is just that bad, as you can hear here.
Notice that I'm not in my home studio right now.
And here's a clip from the top of the mountain so you can just get a sense of how strong that wind was going and just how bad the audio is. You can barely hear me.
Just to show how windy it is up here. It is crazy cold and it is windy.
Here we are, let's get on with it. Now, there are tons of things that you can do to make your travels more productive from a photography standpoint. But what I'd like to discuss here are tips and tricks that I personally use when I'm traveling, at home or abroad. So stick around until the end of this video and you'll learn all the travel photography tips that have worked for me over the years. Now pull up a seat and let's go. Now, one of the first things that you want to do is you want to set expectations ahead of time, guys. Sometimes you're traveling alone, you can do whatever the hell you want. If you want to do nothing but take photos all day, yeah, knock yourself out. Sometimes you might be traveling with a group of photographers, which could be a dream, right? Get to shoot all day, get to talk about gear, processing, and all the awesome shots you got. Now, other times, you might be with people that might not be into photography at all, so your time to take photos might be limited so you don't get harassed by your wife for spending too much time behind the camera. Just kidding, I love you, honey. Anyways, it's important to establish goals and expectations for what you can do photography-wise before you depart. For example, let's say your location you're visiting is best photographed in the morning. That being the case, you need to set expectations ahead of time, not only for yourself, but also for the people that you're with. So perhaps that staying out late the night before might not be the best plan. If you set realistic expectations ahead of time, you'll find that your travels are much less stressful and much more productive. You guys are gonna love this one. Bring the right gear, but not the kitchen sink. I can't tell you how important it is to have the right kit for travel photography. After all, it's not like you can run home to get a different lens, right? Now, if you're like me, you might have a tendency of overpacking. So while you need the right gear for the trip, be careful not to bring every last piece of photography gear that you own. Now, when I travel, almost always I will have 2 camera bodies with me. These days, it's the Nikon Z7 for still photos because it's simply an amazing do-everything camera. I also bring a camera with me specifically for shooting video. In the past, this was my Panasonic GH5, but these days I'm shooting video on the Canon EOS R. Now, not everybody needs 2 cameras, so don't go out there and buying a second camera just because that's what I do. This is what works for me, guys. For you, the best situation might be to simply have a smartphone. After all, guys, the best camera is the one that you have with you. Paired with my cameras are a few different lenses that I always have with me. You see, guys, I shoot landscapes and I'm usually shooting wide most of the time. For the Z7, I'll usually have my 14-30mm with me for landscape photography and a 24-70 for just about everything else. In particular, I love the 24-70 because it's so versatile. If I need a all-day lens for running and gunning and taking all kinds of shots, well, guys, this is the lens to do it. With my EOS R, I make sure that I have a 15-35 with me, or if I'm out with the GH5, I like the 12-60mm for shooting video. Additionally, I like to have my DJI Mavic Pro 2 with me, so therefore I can get above everything and capture video and stills that I can't get on the ground. Not to mention, it does make some pretty awesome B-roll. Granted, drone requires some pre-planning because they aren't allowed in many places like in urban areas and national parks. just to name a couple. Just be sure you're familiar with the local laws wherever you go so you don't get in deep doo-doo with your drone. Guys, then of course having a good solid tripod is a absolute must. I'll have either a 34 series from Pro Media Gear with me, or the tip of the sword ideal travel tripod is of course from Peak Design. It's an absolute incredible tripod that you can read all about my review, which I have a link in the description down below. In addition to being ingeniously designed to save space and have a smaller form factor than any other travel tripod, it's also super lightweight, durable, and a breeze to set up and take down. It has all the features that you would appreciate for your photography adventures. Now, other items I typically bring on my travels are wet weather gear, extra batteries, memory cards, a small notepad for taking notes in the field, and of course a good camera strap and a camera bag. Again, guys, this is a kit that has worked best for me in my types of photography that I do. It's a kit that has definitely evolved over the years and will continue to evolve as time goes by. But the point I want to make here is I've thought about what items go into my kit and included those purposefully. If you do the same and really consider what is most important for you, your photography, and your goals, you can set up and outfit yourself a great kit as well. Next, do the work of finding the best locations. If you really want to experience the locations you're visiting and you want to get the shots that no one else does, guys, you need to hunker down and do some research ahead of time. Get off the beaten path. Now, before you even leave for the trip, spend some time researching the locations you're visiting. I like to use Google Maps to get an overhead view of the locations I'll be photographing because I like to get a lay of the land. I look for places to park, I map out the route on how to get there from the hotel, I check out sunrise times and sunset times so I can time my arrival at that location to capitalize on the golden hour light. Guys, you get the point. The more legwork that you put into the planning ahead of time, the smoother the sailing will be. Now, once your travels are underway, challenge yourself to get away from the crowds. Now, guys, this doesn't mean you shouldn't visit the postcard locations that everyone photographs, but those locations are busy and you often have to fight space to get your gear set up. So what I like to do is I like to ask locals of lesser known spots I can visit. Now, I don't go rush it up to somebody on the street and demand to know their favorite location to photograph. Instead, I try to find people that might be in the know. A concierge at the hotel, a clerk at the convenience store, travel agents, and so forth. Better yet, I keep my eyes peeled for other photographers to pick their brains about some of the off-beaten path areas that I can explore. Now, you need to be safe, of course, but I've found that talking with locals, genuinely talking to them and taking interest in their perspective is a great way to find those hidden gems that not many other photographers will find. Next, be patient, guys. Now, when I'm traveling, I know that I often have to fight the urge to hurry up. There's just so much to see and do and experience, so I sometimes tend to rush from one spot to the next. The problem with this is running around like a chicken with a head cut off doesn't do you any favors. So not only does rushing around mean that you're more likely to make mistakes with things like camera settings, composition, but it also means you might miss the right opportunity to capture the best photos. I've lost track of how many times I've been on location and the obvious shot opportunity had come and gone, and I felt the temptation to pick up and leave. This is where patience and a little luck pays in. One of the most common examples of this is during sunsets. When the sun dips down below the horizon, you'll see most of the people picking up, packing up, and heading off. But this is a huge mistake. Even if you already got some excellent shots, the light changes so quickly that you might even find a better shot present itself if you just hang around for a few more minutes. Likewise, you might find colors of the sky before the sun fully sets, but if you're patient and you wait for the sunset to be complete, more pleasing colors might show up here in a bit. In this photo I took at Instable, I waited for the blue hour to come, and I think it was a great choice. The muted tones of the skies allow the vibrant colors of the buildings and the city lights to pop. Other times the location might have an awesome foreground with tons of interest, but the sky is just pretty blah. Again, to be patient, to wait for the right colors in the sky or the clouds to roll in can turn an okay shot into something much more special. Kind of like what happened in this photo from a recent trip to Norway. I was ready to pack up and move to the next location, but I decided to wait and see what the clouds did. And guys, I'm glad I did. As you can see, they turned into some very dramatic looking clouds. I love the shape of the clouds and the colors as well. So waiting a few moments got me a better shot, and that's the kind of patience that can do wonders for your shots as well. Next, guys, make it a priority to include people. Now, I'm a landscape photographer, so portraits really aren't my thing, but when I travel, I try to make it a point to include people in my photos. I do this a couple ways. First, I challenge myself to take portraits. I walk the streets, I talk to people, and I ask if I can take their picture. This really does challenge me creatively, but also challenges me on a human level. I love meeting new people and hearing their stories, and I find learning more about the people that live in these locations I'm visiting helps me understand more about the location through their eyes. And that, in turn, helps me create images that have much more impact. Likewise, the backstory of the people I meet, I'm able to create photos that offer a stronger story about that location. Another way that I make it a priority to include people is having people in my landscape shots. Now, I know some landscape purists think landscapes should only be landscapes, but I disagree. Including a person in a landscape shot immediately draws the attention of the viewer, so you have strong subject to pull people into the shot. Adding people into landscapes also provides scale for the shot. Sometimes, especially when shooting with a wide-angle lens, the sheer size of a landscape before you can get a little lost. But add a person into the scene and you have an automatic sense of scale. Viewers can compare the size of the familiar object, that being the person, with the surroundings and come up with a better understanding of how grand or how vast that scene is. Next, you want to look for unique perspective. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to get away from the crowds and away from the scenes that everybody is shooting. Guys, even taking a few steps to the left or a few steps to the right can make such a big difference and make your shot so unique enough that it can stand out on its own. I took this shot in Norway about 80 feet from an extremely busy and popular photography spot. Not only did my image give a different view of this village because I was shooting from a much different spot, but also dropping the camera down to capture more of the foreground also made it a much better photo. Shooting from a very low angle like this brings in all sorts of interest details like the rocks and makes the foreground much more compelling. And one other thing, guys, you can shoot from a higher perspective to give a little bit different view on popular photo spots. Another aspect of looking for unique perspective is to find interesting elements to include in your compositions. A lot of the photos I see in the northern lights of Norway are of the lights just shimmering above the snow-capped mountains, which is pretty cool. But while these photos are certainly beautiful, I wanted a different perspective. We drove around in the middle of nowhere and found this single tree in the middle of this cornfield with a snow-covered mountain in the back, and above, of course, were the northern lights. I like how the tree is silhouetted in the front of the northern lights, and it makes the shot completely unique. Now, it didn't take much for me to make both of these shots much more unique. Just finding a different perspective can do wonders for improving the visual appeal of your shots. Next, seize the moment. Now, while patience is definitely important for travel photography, so is seizing the moment. Now, after all, guys, that specific moment where the specific light in the specific scene will never be the same again. Guys, when the opportunity arises to capture an awesome shot, don't hesitate, go for it. By the same token, try not to get into the rut of thinking, oh, I'll just get that photo tomorrow. Again, these unique moments won't happen again. They won't be repeated. So if something strikes you as you're walking around or you're driving from one location to another, guys, stop, get out, get your camera out and get shooting. Okay. Bad weather isn't all that bad. When the weather goes bad, get out and find a shot. Let me clarify. I'm not saying if there's a Category 5 hurricane to head out and photograph it. Use some common sense and know your equipment. If it's raining so hard that Noah is prepping his ark and the camera that you have is not weather sealed, that might be a good time for you just to stay indoors and not head out. However, if the clouds are rolling in and there's light rain or light snow and your gear is either weather sealed or you have some sort of rain protection, get out and see what kind of shots you can find. Weather can bring drama and interest to what might have been an average or blah shot. Besides, since most people run for cover during bad weather, you won't have to fight crowds. And those shots you get with the beautiful clouds and the raindrops and the snowflakes will make your shots much more unique representations of the locations you visited, because again, most people will be indoors hiding. So look at bad weather not as a bummer, but as an opportunity to get out, capture much more unique shots. Well, there you go, my friend. Just a few travel photography tips that have helped me over the years. I hope you find these tips valuable and that you get out and explore this big, beautiful world that's around us. If you found this video to be helpful, hit the like button down below. If you're currently not subscribed to the channel, my friend, we would love to have you around. Please subscribe. And while you're at it, hit the bell to be notified as we come out with new videos. So what are you waiting for? You get out there and take your best shot.